Second Chances. Chapter 15.
Captain, we have received our orders from the System Navy.
Lieutenant Abel's voice came over the comm. David answered, "Transfer them to my ready room, please, Lieutenant." David keyed the display on his desk. The set of the System Navy orders was presented before him. Headquarters, the System Navy to USS Constitution, Captain David Stevens. You are to return to the System Navy Academy NLT, no later than Julian date 29/05/31 to transport the Academy graduates to the appropriate naval bases for transfer to their assigned ships. Darian Marovich, Admiral, Commander-in-Chief. David tapped his comm badge. "Number 1, please join me in my ready room." John stepped through the door and addressed David.
"Captain?"
"Ah, John, we've orders. First, we are to get to the System Navy Academy, pick up all those ensigns, and take them all over the quadrant," David told him.
"Not much of a job for a heavy cruiser. But it should be a quiet time."
John returned.
"Well, I'll alert the purser to prepare for them. How many are there?"
"I haven't gotten the roster. Asked Lieutenant Abels to request the roster and assignments from the System Navy," David replied. John asked,
"What about the Admiral? Should we tell him what our next mission is?"
"I'll tell Admiral Halloran," David responded. "He's probably ready for a little rest, too."
"Okay, I might as well get started, with your permission, sir."
John grinned at his captain. David stepped out of the ready room and headed to the personnel lift. "Number 1, you have the con. I'll be with the Admiral and then in the gym." As the personnel lift door opened, David turned to see his first officer nod and take the center chair. David stepped into the lift, moved down into the ship's bowels, and stopped near the VIP quarters. Stepping out, he thumbed the signal near the Admiral's quarters.
"Enter,"
was the Admiral's answer. David stepped into the cabin, and seeing the Admiral sitting near Sherry, he stopped and said, "I'm sorry, sir, if this is an inconvenient time, I'll come back later."
No, Captain, please, have a seat."
Halloran replied.
"What's on your mind?"
"Admiral, we have a mission assignment from the System Navy. We are to take all the Academy graduates to various naval bases." "Nothing very exciting," David replied.
"Well, that's good. I asked Darian for this assignment, Captain. I thought the crew could use a little quiet time."
The Admiral returned.
"I should have consulted you first. My apologies, Dave."
"You're right, sir. We do need the rest. Since many members of this crew are married, they all need some time to be married." "Thanks, Admiral," David replied.
"If I recall, you are one of the ship's bachelors."
This came from Sherry. "I guess I will be for a while," David said wistfully. "But the crew's happy and even more efficient for it. So I'm satisfied for the moment," Tim said.
"Dave, I have good news."
"What's that, sir?"
"I heard from Darian this morning. The courts-martial's records have all been reviewed, and many sentences have been reversed or reduced."
"That's great, sir. Do you know who has been affected?"
"He sent me a complete list of your crew. Most sentences were reduced. Most of your people have at least one strike back."
"Who has had their sentence reversed completely?" "Well, to start, T. Vass and Sorrell will go back to being Commodores. John and Beverly will return to Captain. Larry will be promoted to Commander. Jenny Olsen will become Captain again. And Tori will be a Commander again. And Charlie down in the Quartermaster, he will get back his Chief stripes." "That's great.
I'll give you the complete list later."
"When are these things going to happen?"
"Right after we finish delivering all these ensigns."
The three sat for a long time, and then David broke the silence. "Sherry, I've had the doctor examine you down to the molecular level, and they cannot tell me why, when you touch someone, they fall in love and with someone else you have touched that returns their love. Can you tell me what it is?" Sherry glanced at Tim Halloran. He nodded, and she began to speak.
"My race has 2 gifts. First, we are empathic. We can't read minds, but we can feel what others feel. And we can sometimes discern the object of these feelings. Sometimes, we can gently guide positive feelings in the right direction. Feelings like love, joy, peace, happiness, and self-esteem."
She paused and looked at David, then continued.
"The second gift my race has is genetic. We can pass on to other intelligent beings a predisposition to love.
Okay, David began. You've passed this predisposition to love to many members of my crew. How will this affect their performance of duty and the future of our ability to fight in the event of a war? We still have enemies in this galaxy, like the robots that destroyed your world. Admiral Halloran said.
Has there been a problem with the performance of duty or of defending ourselves, Captain?
No sir, but this is a relatively new phenomenon. These are all combat veterans. I'm concerned about the future. David returned. Sherry again said.
We give only a predisposition to love, Captain. Your crew will continue to perform their duties as well, if not better than they always have. Regarding fighting, the only thing that may change is non-aggravated aggression. But as for defending themselves, their families, their ship, or the Federation, they may well fight harder and smarter than before.
Sherry continued.
As for the future, who can say?
David looked at the couple sitting before him. You said it was genetic? Sherry said.
Yes, that is what I was taught. Your people have the trait, but what I have is just more profound.
Then, perhaps, Dr. T. Vass or Dr. M. Tao could isolate that portion of your genetic code and splice it into a human. T. Vass said you were 99.9% human, genetically. David returned.
I would be happy to cooperate.
Please do, the captain said. We need a genetic predisposition to love and to nurture positive emotions. Well, I'm off to the gym. Good afternoon. Admiral Halloran stood and let David out of the cabin. David walked to the gym and began his workout. A little taekwondo, kung fu, savate, and boxing today should help keep him in shape and practice. Several days later, David stepped onto the bridge.
Captain on the bridge!
John stepped away from the center chair. As you were, David replied. John, what have we got on our future passengers?
We have 221 graduates to pick up. The purser has arranged accommodations for them. They will be a little crowded. But no more than at the academy. And, oh, we have one graduate assigned to the Constitution, an Ensign Black.
John reported. David started. What could Ensign Black have done that was so bad he got an assignment aboard this vessel?
Can't answer that, sir. She was third in her class.
John replied. David mused. The system Navy is getting soft in the head. Can it be that they might be taking the Constitution seriously? Oh, well, what is her specialty? John checked his palm pack.
It says here, Command, Weapons, and Navigation Captain.
When do we arrive at the academy, John? David asked.
We arrive in about 2 hours, right on time.
John returned. David started toward the ready room. John, after we have picked up our passages, see that our new ensign is given adequate crew quarters. Then have the ensign report to me here. John smiled.
The only crew quarters available until we deliver our passengers is next to your cabin, Captain.
David looked tired. That's fine. I just want our crew members to know they are our crew members, not just passengers. Okay?
Aye, aye, sir.
John shot back. David turned and stepped into his ready room. On his desk was a palm pad with the personnel records of Ensign Black. David pushed it back inside. He'd look at it later. He turned to the replicator. Coffee, black, Stevens blend, strong and hot. The replicator produced the coffee. David took it and sat back to sip his coffee. The door signal chimed, and David checked his watch. It must be Ensign Black. He had fallen asleep. He turned his chair away from the door and called, "Enter." He rubbed his eyes and tried to rid himself of any evidence of having been asleep before he turned to face the ensign.
Ensign Black, reporting as directed by the first officer, sir.
He turned and looked up to see. His heart leapt into his throat. Stella, is it really you? She started, her face turning white.
David.
Leaping out of his seat and coming around the desk, he caught her as she sank to the floor. He lifted her and set her on the couch, being careful not to hurt her. She looked into his eyes.
Is it really you, David?
Yes, it's me. But how? I thought I had lost you forever.
David, the robot R. Franklin told me you were in the system Navy. However, no one would tell me anything about you, so I joined the system Navy to try and find you.
She told him, tears running down her face. He saw her through his many tears. I have missed you every day since I climbed into Dr. Franklin's sleep coffin. She clutched him and said,
I have thought about you every day too. Oh, I missed you.
How did you get here, 500 years in the future? David asked. She smiled.
Same as you. I'll tell you everything later. Oh, kiss me please, darling.
And he kissed her very gently.
Oh, David, do that again.
And he did. Over the comm came Admiral Halloran's voice.
Attention to orders, this is Admiral Halloran. At 1600 hours, all off-duty personnel will assemble in the rec room to witness the wedding of Captain David Stevens and Ensign Stella Black. Halloran out.
David and Stella held each other until time to dress for the wedding. Then, they exited the ready room to the applause of the deck crew. Then, headed to the personnel lift, they left for their cabins and changed. He was in the rec room before she was. He waited with O'Reilly and the crew, tall and straight in his dress uniform. Then came the traditional wedding march. Everyone turned to see Admiral Halloran, in dress uniform, with Stella on his arm. She walked slowly toward David, beautiful in a white gown with little white slippers and veil. As they reached the front of the rec room, the first officer stepped out to stand beside David. And on the other side, Commander Beverly Slater's self stepped out to stand beside Stella. Both officers were resplendent in their dress uniforms. John nudged David and showed him a ring. The ring he had bought Stella at the BX back at Groom Lake had been under his pillow for 8 long years. Beverly nudged Stella and showed her a ring, and both officers smiled their impish best. Captain O'Reilly cleared his throat.
If everyone is in place, we are gathered here before God among this party to witness the joining together of this man and this woman in the bonds of holy matrimony. Who gives this woman to be married to this man?
Admiral Halloran smiled at the couple and said,
My wife and I do.
Then he placed Stella's hand in David's and stepped back. David stumbled through the ceremony, dropping the ring twice. Still, at last, O'Reilly intoned seriously and dramatically.
Then, by my authority as a captain of the USS Constitution and according to the system Navy regulations, I now pronounce that you are husband and wife. You may kiss your bride.
Both shaking, their lips met to thunderous applause. Back slaps, handshakes, toasts, and many congratulations later, the newlyweds slipped away. They stood before his cabin door. He lifted her into his arms and stepped into the cabin. Someone had moved her things in. He turned to his bride and wrapped his arms around her. Kissing and embracing, they moved toward a brand new queen-sized bed. And with that, we will grant this deserving couple their privacy. Good night.